Britain is at war yet again. This time it's in Yemen, a country that the UK has bombed repeatedly throughout the last 100 years. And this time it's to help Israel get away with its genocide in Gaza. In this video, I'm going to discuss all the latest developments with my colleague Matt Kennard. Hi there, Matt. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Thanks for having me, Phil.
We've worked together closely the last few years covering the previous UK-backed war in Yemen. This time, we don't need to do any exposing because they are just all out going for it. UK jets have just bombed Yemen last night.
Yeah, I mean it's sickening, really, isn't it? I mean, to see, because the context is obviously an ongoing genocide in Gaza, perpetrated by Israel, heavily backed by the US, which is supplying weapons, and the UK, which is facilitating those weapons arriving in Israel. So you've got the US and the UK backing one of the most horrific crimes in history, I think, actually. I mean, it's up there. And then the Houthis who control the capital of Yemen and large parts of Yemen have taken it upon themselves to disrupt oil tankers and other ships in the Red Sea in retaliation to try and stop that genocide. And they're now being attacked by the US and UK, the backers of the genocide. So it's horrific. And as you say, this comes on the back of a kind of silent war, or has been silenced by the mainstream media, that the US and UK have been perpetrating in Yemen since 2015. Obviously led by the Saudis, but heavily, again, like with their Israeli client, heavily backed by the US and UK in the case of Saudi Arabia's war on Yemen.
The timing of it as well. I mean, yesterday, I think a lot of people watched South Africa's submissions at the International Court of Justice. It felt like, finally Israel was being held to account and the narrative was shifting towards talking about it as a genocide, which is exactly how it should be framed. And almost as if to distract from that, from about 7 or 8 p.m. last night, all the briefing to the media was, we're going to bomb Yemen. We're going to do it tonight. We're going in. And it's, this is now the front pages. It's what's dominating the headlines. They're trying to say that it's somehow self-defense, but the UN resolution that was passed on Wednesday didn't authorize airstrikes on Yemen. It actually called for restraint, but ultimately what would stop it would be a ceasefire in Gaza. We know the Houthis would quite happily stop doing this if there was a ceasefire. And you were talking about the context there, Matt. I mean, I've done a rough sort of look back at all the times Britain has bombed or been at war in Yemen, either overtly or covertly, in the last 100 years. And I think this is the 6th time.
It really sickens me, because we've all
Yeah.
been deeply affected by watching what's happening in Gaza for the last 3 months, and to see the one country which has stood up for the victims of genocide getting hit with airstrikes is beyond comprehension, really.
All infrastructure is there for them to do it, right? These 4 RAF Typhoons took off from RAF Akrotiri, which is this base on an occupied part of Cyprus. And then they went in and they fired these hugely expensive paveway missiles. And between them and the US, they're saying they hit 16 targets. The Houthis are saying it was much more, 73 strikes, and that 5 of their people were killed and 6 others injured. Your work the last few months has been exposing how the UK is using that base on Cyprus for both sending supplies to Israel's military, and also these surveillance flights that they've been running over Gaza. And now we've seen the base being used directly to bomb Yemen. Can you tell us a little bit about the protest this weekend outside the base that your work has inspired?
Yeah, so as a bit of background, these were bases that were retained when Cyprus achieved independence from Britain in 1960. Well, it didn't actually achieve independence, is the reality of it. These bases are not just military bases. They're huge expanses of land. They comprise 3% of the territory of Cyprus, the island. So they're big territories, and they're not just military sites. They're huge intelligence installations as well, which are used by the US and the UK to spy all over the Middle East and North Africa. And now, this Sunday, the Cyprus Peace Council, which is an old institution, I think it was founded in like the late 1940s, has called for a march to Akrotiri, the British base in the west of the island. And it's just this week was just backed by the umbrella trade union organization in Cyprus as well. And from what I've heard, they're expecting it to be quite big.
I spoke to one of the organizers earlier in this week. You can see that video on our YouTube channel as well. And just talking about these key nodes in how Britain's still able to act like a kind of imperial power around the world. Another one that I revealed this week in an article on our website is a base 70 miles from Yemen's border in part of Oman near a city called Salalah. And this is a great big spy base that GCHQ have there, taps into undersea internet cables. And we were able to show using satellite images how that base has been secretly upgraded over the last few years. They've built a new facility there. It's about the size of 6 tennis courts. This is all completely undisclosed. We were only able to expose it from the satellite images. GCHQ refused to comment. And this comes at a really interesting time in Oman, where actually there's more opposition towards the British bases there. Britain has loads and loads of bases in Oman. And there's a video clip that someone put out, an Omani guy, they filmed it themselves. They went up to some British soldiers in a canteen and started saying, why are you in this country? You should leave. You're supporting Israel. Get out. Another thing that I've picked up on a lot in the mainstream media coverage of this, Matt, is how the Houthis are described. It's just Iran-backed militia, Houthi rebel movement. And I mean, sometimes we use this language ourselves because, if you frame it in a certain way, there's a level of accuracy. But then another way of looking at this is now the Houthis have controlled Yemen's capital city, Sana'a, since I think about 2015, possibly slightly earlier. They are the de facto government now. The majority of population in Yemen live under their control. And although they've been a very polarizing force in the past, because of their stance on Gaza, they have become much more popular. And the supposed UN recognized government of Yemen, UN recognized president that the UK always cite in support of their actions, Mansour Hadi, he was elected in 2012. He was the only candidate. He ran unopposed. So he won 100% of the vote. Turnout was about 60%. I think it was only a term of 3 years. I mean, but it certainly expired long ago. So the idea that he is somehow the legitimate representative, he also lived in Saudi Arabia for most of this time because it wasn't safe for him to live in Yemen.
They're having to resort to extremely crude propaganda, which is, I don't think it's ever been as crude as it is, because it's so obvious to people now what's happening. Regardless of what you think about the Houthis, and they have been involved in human rights abuses, as you say, they're the de facto government. They control the capital of the country. And they're hugely popular in the Muslim world now because of because of the solidarity they've shown. They are Iran-backed, so I don't actually mind people using that. If we then use US-backed, UK-backed, Saudi Wahhabi dictatorship, which is the reality, but that's the way the propaganda system works. We're only allowed to say when we're describing a regime or a group in a pejorative fashion, we can only say they're backed by official enemies. We can't say our own client dictators are backed by us. That's not possible.
This bombing, it took place overnight without parliamentary approval. I think Sunak's off in Ukraine or something today, probably won't be debated in Parliament until Monday. Some MPs are saying, it should go through Parliament first, but also a lot of them seem like even if it went to Parliament, they'd just vote for it anyway. I mean, Labour have immediately backed it, but said, we want to discuss it in Parliament.
The UK is a one-party state that has 2 factions. And that is true on most issues, but it's particularly true on foreign policy. There is a completely uniform perspective. And in terms of war, there's the Labour Party, which would be the one that you would assume might provide some sort of democratic check on war waging by the right wing or the Conservative Party. They never do. And in fact, sometimes they're more gun-ho than the Tories. Obviously, it was a Labour government that went into invaded Iraq illegally.
So we don't know whether there'll be more airstrikes tonight. There's a huge demonstration planned in London tomorrow, Stop the War demonstration. And then there's the demonstration in Cyprus on Sunday, like you mentioned. We've got loads of videos and articles on our website and YouTube channel about Yemen. Matt and I made a documentary about exactly how Britain supplies the Saudi Air Force for that bombing campaign in Yemen. And like we said, the same kind of infrastructure is in place now for Britain to do it directly. So if you want to find out more, there's lots for you to check out there. I know you've got to go now, Matt, for another call, but thanks for talking to me about this morning.
Good to chat, Phil.